The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be the crown jewel of football's greatest expansion ever. 48 teams, 16 stadiums, 3 host nations, a tournament designed to shatter every record ever set. But just days into the competition, a very different story is taking shape, and it's centered squarely on the United States, on FIFA, and on a web of politics, money, and power that was building long before any ball was kicked. Let's set the scene first. This tournament kicked off on June 11th and runs all the way through July 19th. It's being hosted across 16 cities, 11 in the United States, 3 in Mexico, and 2 in Canada. The format now includes 104 total matches, with 72 in the group stage and 32 in the knockout rounds. That is a massive leap from the 64 match 32-team tournaments fans have known for decades. And here's the thing that matters immediately. Even though 3 countries share hosting duties, the United States is effectively running the show. 78 of the 104 matches are being played on American soil. So, whatever happens in American stadiums doesn't just shape the experience of one country. It shapes the global perception of World Cup 2026 itself. That's why everything happening off the pitch matters just as much as what's happening on it. And what's happening off the pitch is extraordinary. Before a single match was played, this tournament was already being called one of the most controversial in history. Not because of the football, but because of the politics, the pricing, the power plays, and the man who sits at the center of all of it, FIFA President Gianni Infantino. Let's talk about Infantino first, because without understanding him, none of the rest of this makes sense. Gianni Infantino took over FIFA in 2016, in the aftermath of one of the biggest corruption scandals in sports history. The previous regime under Sepp Blatter had become synonymous with bribery, kickbacks, and backroom deals. Infantino was supposed to be the clean break, the reformer, the man who would restore FIFA's credibility. Instead, what emerged over the following decade was something arguably more complicated. A president who mastered the art of political survival at the cost of the very neutrality FIFA is legally obligated to maintain. The relationship between Infantino and Donald Trump goes back years. During Trump's first term, Infantino was a regular presence at the White House. He handed Trump red and yellow penalty cards during one visit, joking they were for the press. At a dinner in Davos in January of 2020, Infantino publicly called Trump "my great friend." The friendship deepened over the years, and the working relationship was clear. The United States wanted the World Cup, Trump wanted the prestige, and Infantino wanted a powerful political ally heading into the tournament he had staked his legacy on. When Trump returned to the White House in January 2025, the dynamic intensified. Infantino became a regular presence in Washington again. He attended events at the White House. He publicly praised the administration. And then came a decision that drew criticism from across the football world. FIFA awarded Donald Trump its newly created Peace Prize. This was announced just over 2 months before the United States launched airstrikes on Iran. The award was described by critics as a mockery of everything FIFA claims to stand for. A human rights nonprofit called Fair Square filed a formal complaint, calling for an investigation into Infantino's alleged violation of FIFA's obligation to political neutrality. But Infantino didn't just ignore the criticism, he leaned into it. Speaking from Mexico City on the eve of the tournament, he struck a defiant tone and told critics essentially to chill. He said he felt no remorse about the events leading up to the tournament. The man running the world's most watched sporting event seemed unbothered by the questions surrounding him. FIFA's own statute is unambiguous. It requires all officials to remain politically neutral. Former FIFA governance chairman Miguel Maduro stated publicly that Infantino had violated those rules by endorsing Trump's policies. The New York Times published a detailed investigation into Infantino's years-long effort to cultivate Trump's favor, noting that FIFA had rented event space from Trump family properties and that soccer officials privately questioned who really benefits from the relationship. The answer, at least for FIFA's business interests heading into this tournament, seemed obvious. The political complications didn't stop at photo opportunities. They spilled directly into the tournament itself. Iran qualified for the 2026 World Cup as the top team in its Asian qualifying group. It should have been a straightforward process from there. Instead, Iran's presence at this tournament became a flashpoint for everything that is uncomfortable about mixing football and geopolitics. In June of 2025, the Trump administration announced an executive order imposing a travel ban on citizens from 12 countries, including Iran. Exceptions were promised for athletes traveling for major international sporting events like the World Cup or the Olympics. But in practice, those exemptions proved complicated. In November 2025, the United States denied visas to members of the Iranian delegation attending the World Cup draw in Washington. Iran announced it would boycott the draw ceremony entirely in protest. FIFA was forced to intervene. Eventually, a reduced delegation attended. Iran had requested 9 visas and received only 4, including one for head coach Amir Ghalanaway. The Iranian Soccer Federation called it a non-sporting and wholly political decision by the United States government. And there's more context that makes this situation even more uncomfortable. During the months leading up to the tournament, protests erupted across Iran. Several Iranian athletes and footballers were reportedly killed during that period. There were widespread calls for FIFA to ban Iran from the competition entirely, citing human rights concerns and the country's ongoing repression of athletes and citizens alike. FIFA remained silent on most of those calls. Then, following the start of military hostilities involving Iran and the United States, 2 nations that were simultaneously co-hosting and competing in the same tournament. The controversy around Iran's participation reached a new level of tension. Allowing Iran to play in a World Cup being held on American soil amid an active geopolitical conflict between the 2 countries was a situation with no real precedent in tournament history. FIFA also scheduled a match between Egypt and Iran in Seattle, which happens to be the same weekend as Seattle's Pride Parade. Both Egypt and Iran have laws that actively criminalize LGBTQ identity. The scheduling decision drew immediate criticism from advocates and local officials who felt FIFA had been indifferent to what that pairing meant in that specific city on that specific weekend. The complaints about FIFA's handling of human rights, political neutrality, and tournament planning were stacking up. And then came the tickets. FIFA had promised the biggest World Cup ever, but it also made it, by a wide margin, the most expensive one. Between October 2025 and April 2026, FIFA raised ticket prices for more than 90 of the 104 World Cup matches. Across the 3 main pricing categories, prices rose by an average of 34%. Tickets for the final at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey were reported to reach $5,785 on the secondary market, with some listings hitting 5 figures. By late May of 2026, the Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey had seen enough. Letitia James of New York and Jennifer Davenport of New Jersey issued formal subpoenas to FIFA, demanding that the organization disclose how it arrived at those pricing structures. Davenport described the entire ticket-buying experience as a gauntlet of confusion, fake scarcity, and exorbitant prices. The subpoenas covered FIFA's general pricing strategy, seat location practices, and all ticketing decisions related to the 8 World Cup matches scheduled at MetLife Stadium, including the final. James's office also launched a separate investigation into whether fans had been misled during the purchasing process. FIFA, as it often does, responded by saying everything was fine. And then the tournament started, and the empty seats showed up. Even before the attendance crisis became a major story, the pattern was already there for anyone willing to see it. During the expanded Club World Cup, held in the United States in 2025, multiple matches were delayed by lightning strikes. One game stretched to nearly 5 hours because of repeated weather stoppages. Coaches openly questioned whether summer tournaments in the U.S. were being scheduled with any realistic understanding of American weather conditions. Those warnings didn't change anything. The 2026 World Cup kicked off in Mexico City at the Azteca, one of the most iconic venues in football history. The stadium that hosted Pelé's 1970 World Cup final, the stadium where Maradona scored the goal of the century in 1986. And now, the first stadium ever to host World Cup matches across 3 separate tournaments. When Mexico opened the competition there, the atmosphere was everything a World Cup is supposed to look like. Packed stands, non-stop singing, emotional supporters. A country experiencing the tournament minute by minute, with a sense of shared national pride that traveled through television screens around the world. Then the broadcasts cut to the American venues. The second match of the tournament, South Korea versus Czech Republic in Guadalajara, showed something that made headlines immediately: swathes of empty seats. FIFA reported an official attendance of 44,985 for a stadium that holds 46,000. The images told a different story. Large sections of seats were visibly unoccupied. Fans who were at the game blamed the pricing directly. When ordinary supporters cannot afford to attend, the seats go to corporate buyers and speculators who sometimes don't show up at all. FIFA's response was that many fans had chosen to stay in the concourse areas rather than sit in their seats throughout the match. That explanation was widely met with skepticism. The Canada versus Bosnia and Herzegovina match showed similar issues. So did Qatar versus Switzerland. Visible empty sections throughout, despite official figures claiming the venues were nearly full. An analysis by The Athletic found that across the first 6 matches of the tournament, FIFA's own numbers showed only around 1,574 unoccupied seats total. But what viewers saw on television did not match those figures. The discrepancy between official statistics and visual reality became its own controversy. In Los Angeles, the United States men's national team opened their campaign against Paraguay. The U.S. MNT won 4-1. 4 goals, a strong performance, the kind of result that should generate energy across a home nation tournament. And yet, television cameras caught visible empty sections at SoFi Stadium, a host nation winning comfortably in their own tournament, and the stadium still didn't look completely full. For international viewers watching around the world, the question became obvious. If the host nation's own opener doesn't fill the building, what happens during the neutral group stage matches with no natural home crowd? There was also a practical side to the story that directly affected fans who did show up. In Los Angeles, organizers had arranged shuttle systems to help supporters reach SoFi Stadium, but reports from the area described massive traffic congestion before and after the match. Some fans spent hours trapped in their cars, trying to leave the venue after the final whistle. When you factor in the heat, the long walks from transportation drop-off points, the security lines, and the traffic on the way home, the experience of attending a World Cup match at several American venues started to sound more like an ordeal than a celebration. The weather itself has been a tournament-wide problem that nobody can ignore anymore. Multiple early matches carried an 80% or higher chance of performance-impairing heat conditions. South Korea versus Czech Republic in Guadalajara, Netherlands versus Japan in Dallas, Germany versus Curaçao in Houston, Saudi Arabia versus Uruguay in Miami, and projections for the second week showed matches like England versus Croatia and Portugal versus the Democratic Republic of Congo facing even harsher conditions. Climate data shows that many of the tournament venues are significantly hotter in June and July today than they were even during the 1970 World Cup. 14 of the 16 stadiums regularly experience extreme summer heat. Only a handful are fully climate-controlled. That makes this not an isolated logistical problem, but a tournament-wide structural challenge that FIFA chose to build into the competition when it decided to host it in the American summer. Severe storms added another dimension. A group stage match in Philadelphia was disrupted when fan areas had to be evacuated due to dangerous weather conditions. Supporters who had traveled internationally, some spending thousands of dollars on tickets, suddenly found themselves being moved out of their viewing areas while thunderstorms rolled in. And again, this pattern was visible last year during the Club World Cup. The warnings were there. The concerns were raised publicly. Nothing changed. FIFA's official response to the weather issues has been to push more matches toward evening kickoffs and to make hydration breaks mandatory during games. But an evening kickoff doesn't eliminate the hours fans spend outside stadiums in direct sun while waiting in lines, getting through security, or walking from parking areas in summer heat. It addresses part of the problem while leaving the larger one in place. Michel Platini, the former UEFA president, added another layer to the political and legal chaos surrounding this tournament. Just days before the World Cup began, Platini's legal team confirmed they were launching criminal proceedings in Paris against Infantino and 2 former FIFA officials, legal director Marco Villager and head of auditing and compliance Domenico Scala. The complaint alleges that Infantino and the two officials orchestrated a coordinated effort to block Platini from contesting the FIFA presidency. Platini is also suing FIFA separately for financial damages, claiming that football's world governing body intentionally engineered his exclusion from the top job. These are not accusations from an obscure figure. Platini is one of the most decorated players in the history of European football, a three-time Ballon d'Or winner and a former head of UEFA. His legal action against the sitting FIFA president, filed right before the most scrutinized World Cup in a generation, added further pressure to an organization already facing subpoenas, human rights complaints, and political neutrality investigations. And there's the money. FIFA is generating revenues on a scale that was unimaginable a decade ago. The expanded 48-team format means more matches, more broadcast deals, more sponsorship inventory, and more commercial opportunities. There are also reports and investigations suggesting that money is not simply flowing into football development as intended, but that it may be flowing in ways designed to preserve political power structures within FIFA itself. A detailed investigation published just before the tournament kicked off put it bluntly. Evidence suggests that FIFA's money is being directed to maintain Infantino's hold on the organization rather than serving the game. These are allegations, not convictions. But in the context of everything else surrounding this tournament, they land differently than they might have 10 years ago. None of this means the tournament is doomed. The football still has the power to change everything. Every World Cup eventually produces moments that overwhelm the off-field noise. One iconic goal, one stunning upset. One moment that makes every neutral watching forget about ticket prices and empty seats and political controversies. The knockout rounds are where World Cups are truly defined, and those rounds are still ahead. Brazil is beginning another quest for a sixth title. Argentina is trying to defend the crown it won in Qatar in 2022. England and France are entering as genuine contenders. Portugal is navigating the post-Ronaldo era with a new generation of talent. The United States, as the main host, has the opportunity to produce its own story. A deep run, an unforgettable performance, a moment that converts millions of casual American sports fans into permanent believers. And smaller nations are still capable of pulling off the kind of result that defines a tournament entirely. Every World Cup has its Morocco, its South Korea, its Croatia, the team nobody expected that goes all the way and forces the entire world to pay attention. That is the fundamental tension of 2026. On one side, there is a tournament wrapped in genuine controversy, political corruption allegations, a FIFA president who appears to have traded away the organization's neutrality for access to the world's most powerful government, visa discrimination, ticket pricing that locked out millions of ordinary fans, weather conditions that were known to be dangerous long before the first ball was kicked, and attendance figures that appear to diverge from what television cameras are showing. The structural problems are real. The political entanglements are documented. The investigations are ongoing. On the other side, there is the actual football, 48 nations, hundreds of players who have worked their entire lives to reach this stage. Matches that will produce drama nobody can script, moments that will be replayed for decades. And underneath all of it, the enormous, unkillable power of the World Cup itself. The event that, every 4 years, reminds the world that football really is the universal language. The next 2 weeks will tell us a great deal about which of those two stories ends up defining this tournament. If stadiums fill up as knockout rounds approach, if the matches become electric, and if iconic moments start piling on top of each other, then everything that happened in the first week may end up looking like temporary growing pains for an unprecedented expansion. But if empty seats keep appearing on broadcasts, if the weather keeps causing disruptions, if the legal cases against FIFA escalate, and if the atmosphere gap between Mexico's roaring Azteca and several of the American venues becomes more and more obvious, then the opening narrative won't disappear. It will harden into history. The 2026 World Cup is the biggest football tournament ever staged. It is also, without question, the most politically and institutionally controversial one. Those two facts are not contradictions. They are the story.